What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? What would you do? How would you find the strength to keep moving forward when the ground beneath you crumbles? This is the question Sarah Bennett faced one cold autumn evening in Detroit when the factory where she worked shut its doors forever, leaving thousands jobless overnight. But her story isn't just about loss. It's about a spark of hope born from the unlikeliest of places, a revolutionary innovation unveiled by Elon Musk that promises to change America forever. The news spread like wildfire. Musk's latest project could redefine how we live, work, and move. The excitement was palpable, yet the tension beneath it simmered. What would happen to the people left behind by technology's relentless march? Sarah, like many others, stood at the crossroads, uncertain whether to embrace the future or retreat into the safety of the past. That night, as the city lights flickered outside her window, she made a decision that would set her on a path she never expected. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? She whispered to herself, a quiet mantra against the storm of uncertainty. Sarah's journey began not with fanfare, but with the quiet resolve of someone who has lost everything yet refuses to be defeated. Her story will take you through heartbreak, betrayal, hope, and triumph, all set against the backdrop of one of the most ambitious innovations America has ever seen. What if this innovation could change everything? What if it could offer a new future not just for Sarah, but for millions across the country? The question hangs in the air, heavy and alive, as the clock ticks toward a dawn that promises to reshape the American landscape forever. Sarah Bennett grew up in a modest neighborhood of Detroit where the hum of factory machines was as familiar as the rhythm of her heartbeat. Her childhood was stitched together with memories of her father's worn hands and her mother's quiet determination to keep the family afloat during hard times. From an early age, Sarah learned that life was a balancing act between hope and hardship. Her father, John Bennett, once a skilled auto worker, had been laid off years before and struggled to find steady work, leaving a tension between him and Sarah that neither knew how to fully bridge. Despite the strain, Sarah loved him fiercely but often felt the weight of unspoken disappointment in his eyes. Her mother, Diane, was the family's anchor, a nurse who worked double shifts to pay the bills and keep food on the table. Diane's sacrifice taught Sarah the meaning of resilience and the quiet strength of love. In school, Sarah was known for her curiosity and a sharp mind that thirsted for knowledge beyond the textbooks. She was the kind of kid who took apart old radios and gadgets, eager to understand how things worked. Her best friend, Mark Sullivan, shared her fascination with technology, and together they dreamed of futures far beyond the struggling streets of Detroit. But life was never simple. At 16, Sarah's world cracked when her parents' marriage collapsed under the strain of financial stress and unspoken grievances. Her father moved out, and the once warm house grew cold and fractured. Sarah threw herself into her studies and her part-time job at a local hardware store, determined to carve out a life that wouldn't be defined by loss. Yet, beneath her determined exterior, Sarah carried scars, the ache of abandonment, the fear of failure, and the question of whether she was truly capable of breaking free from the cycles that bound her family. After high school, Sarah enrolled in a community college program focused on renewable energy technologies, inspired by news of innovators like Elon Musk who promised a cleaner, brighter future. She worked nights at a factory assembling electric vehicle batteries, hopeful that her efforts would be part of something bigger. But as automation swept through the industry, Sarah found herself among the thousands laid off during a wave of plant closures. The factory doors slammed shut one rainy evening, and with them went not just her paycheck but a piece of her identity. Lost and uncertain, Sarah returned home to find her family fractured even further. Her father, bitter and withdrawn, blamed the new technology for stealing his livelihood, while her mother urged Sarah to keep fighting. Her younger brother, Jamie, barely 16, looked up to Sarah with hope, but she wasn't sure she had any left to give. In those dark days, Sarah's thoughts often drifted back to the early mornings tinkering with gadgets in her childhood bedroom, the thrill of discovery that once lit a fire in her heart. Could she reclaim that spark? Could she turn the promise of innovation into a lifeline for herself and her community? Mark was a constant presence, pushing her to keep her eyes on the future even when everything seemed bleak. "You've got the brains and the guts," he told her one night over cold coffee in a cramped diner. "Don't let anyone tell you that you're not part of the change." His words planted a seed, but the path forward was anything but clear. Sarah's personal relationships were tangled with tension and love. Her father's disappointment was a wall she didn't know how to climb. Her mother's quiet sacrifices weighed heavy on her conscience. Jamie's youthful optimism was a fragile thread she wanted desperately to protect. And Mark's unwavering support was a lifeline she wasn't ready to fully accept. As she stared out over the Detroit skyline, scarred by boarded-up factories and fading dreams, Sarah knew that to move forward, she had to confront not just the external challenges of a changing economy but the emotional wounds that held her back. Her story was not just about survival but about transformation. The promise of Elon Musk's new innovation was more than a headline, it was a beacon that could light the way out of darkness. But embracing that promise would mean stepping into unknown territory, facing doubts and fears, and risking everything she had left. What made Sarah different wasn't just her grit but her willingness to hope, even when the odds were stacked against her. As the city around her braced for change, Sarah prepared to take her first steps into a future that felt both terrifying and thrilling. She was ready to fight for a new beginning, not just for herself but for all those whose lives hung in the balance. And so, with a heart full of questions and a mind sharpened by hardship, Sarah Bennett's journey into the heart of America's next great innovation began. Sarah's world was at a crossroads, a fragile intersection where dreams met reality and the future felt both uncertain and full of promise. After losing her job and grappling with family tensions, she found herself drawn deeper into the world of innovation, fueled by a fierce desire to reclaim control over her life and help the community that had been hit hardest by economic upheaval. The spark that kept her moving wasn't just hope, it was a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Sarah's fascination with technology had started in childhood but had grown into something more profound after the factory closures. She realized that innovation wasn't just about gadgets or flashy inventions, it was about survival, progress, and creating opportunities where none seemed to exist. Elon Musk's name echoed through the news and social media like a beacon for people like Sarah, visionaries and dreamers who believed technology could rewrite the American story. When Musk announced his latest project, promising a breakthrough that could revolutionize energy and transportation, Sarah saw more than headlines. She saw a lifeline for her city, a chance to breathe new life into Detroit's battered neighborhoods. Her best friend Mark was her anchor during this time, his pragmatic skepticism balancing her idealism. Mark was a software engineer who had moved to the city for a tech startup that had since folded. Though cautious by nature, Mark shared Sarah's passion for change and understood the weight of the moment. "This isn't just about technology," he said one evening as they sat on the rooftop of Sarah's apartment building, watching the city lights flicker below. "It's about people. About us. If this works, it could mean jobs, clean energy, and a future that doesn't feel like the past on repeat." But Mark also warned Sarah to be wary of the hype. Not every innovation pans out. Sometimes the cost is higher than the benefit, and the people who need it most get left behind. Sarah nodded, feeling the tension between hope and caution tighten like a noose. She knew the risks but refused to let fear hold her back. At the same time, her relationship with her family continued to be complicated. Her father, John, remained distant, bitter about the changing times and skeptical of Musk's vision. "These new machines don't care about people," he grumbled during a rare family dinner. "They don't care about families or jobs. They just want profits." Sarah tried to bridge the gap, sharing her excitement and plans, but the divide was wide. Her mother, Diane, was more supportive, urging Sarah to keep fighting but warning her to stay grounded. Jamie, her younger brother, looked up to her with wide eyes, hungry for a role model he could believe in. Sarah felt the weight of their expectations like a physical burden, pushing her to succeed but also reminding her of what was at stake. She volunteered at community centers, speaking to groups about the possibilities of Musk's innovation, trying to inspire others to see beyond fear. But she also encountered resistance, neighbors skeptical of promises from tech giants, workers worried about losing their livelihoods, and officials hesitant to embrace unproven technology. These interactions deepened Sarah's resolve but also exposed the complexity of change. It wasn't just a matter of invention, it was about trust, inclusion, and ensuring no one was left behind. One pivotal moment came when Sarah attended a local town hall meeting about the proposed innovation's rollout. The room was packed with voices both hopeful and angry. Workers from shuttered factories demanded guarantees for their futures. Environmentalists questioned the true impact. Politicians sought to balance progress with protection. Sarah stood up, her voice steady despite the tension. She spoke not just as a believer in technology but as someone who had lived the consequences of economic collapse. "We need innovation that works for all of us," she said. "Not just the wealthy or the powerful. This has to be a chance for Detroit, for every American community, to rebuild, to grow, to thrive." Her words sparked a murmur of agreement, but the path forward was anything but clear. That night, back at her apartment, Sarah and Mark pored over news articles, scientific papers, and interviews about Musk's project. They debated the feasibility, the ethical considerations, and the social implications. They dreamed of how the innovation could transform lives but acknowledged the hard work ahead. For Sarah, this was more than a job or a cause, it was her mission. She applied for a position with a nonprofit organization partnering with Musk's team, hoping to be a bridge between the innovation and the communities it aimed to serve. The application process was competitive, and Sarah faced moments of doubt when rejection letters arrived or silence followed her inquiries. But each setback fueled her determination. She knew that to be part of something big, she had to be willing to fight through the barriers. Meanwhile, her friendship with Mark deepened into something more complicated. Long nights working together on community projects blurred the lines between friendship and something tender but unspoken. Sarah found comfort in his presence, someone who understood her fears and dreams without judgment. Yet, she hesitated to open herself fully, wary of distractions from her goal. The city itself seemed to pulse with anticipation and anxiety. News outlets ran stories about Musk's innovation, a clean energy system combined with autonomous transport designed to reduce emissions and create new jobs. The government announced pilot programs, but critics warned about privacy, displacement, and the risks of centralized control. Detroit was the epicenter of this unfolding drama, a testing ground for a future that could either rescue or abandon its people. Sarah's life intertwined with this larger narrative. Each day brought new challenges, meetings with skeptical officials, outreach to wary neighbors, and personal battles with exhaustion and self-doubt. But she also experienced moments of triumph, a successful community event, a breakthrough in understanding the technology, a phone call from an influential supporter. Through it all, Sarah learned to balance hope with realism, passion with pragmatism. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for her family, her city, and a future that felt just within reach. The journey ahead was daunting, full of unknowns and obstacles. Yet, with each step, Sarah felt herself growing stronger, more resilient, and more certain that change was possible, not just the kind of change promised by headlines, but the deep, lasting transformation that comes from people willing to believe in something better. And so, as the sun set over Detroit's skyline, casting long shadows over a city poised on the edge of reinvention, Sarah Bennett prepared to take the next leap forward, into the rising conflict and challenges that would test everything she thought she knew about herself, her community, and the power of innovation. The day Elon Musk announced his latest innovation felt like a turning point not just for Sarah Bennett but for the entire nation. It wasn't just another flashy reveal, it was a bold promise to reshape how Americans lived, worked, and moved. The innovation was called TerraVolt, a groundbreaking energy system combining advanced solar capture with next-generation battery storage and autonomous electric transport pods designed to operate within cities and rural areas alike. Musk described TerraVolt as a revolution in clean, accessible energy and transportation that could rebuild America's infrastructure and economy from the ground up. The announcement electrified the media and sent shockwaves through communities everywhere. For Detroit, still reeling from decades of industrial decline, the news sparked a mix of hope and fear. Sarah watched the live broadcast with a pounding heart, imagining what this could mean for her city and for herself. The promise of new jobs, cleaner air, and revitalized neighborhoods seemed almost too good to be true. But the shadow of doubt crept in quickly. Skeptics questioned the feasibility of Teravolt's technology and worried about the impact on workers displaced by automation and green tech. Union leaders feared losing what little job security remained. Local politicians worried about costs and potential disruptions. Sarah found herself caught in the middle of these conflicting voices. She wanted to believe in Teravolt's potential, but she also understood the deep fears of her community. At a town meeting held shortly after the announcement, the room was thick with tension. Residents voiced their worries about losing jobs, rising costs, and the possibility that the new technology might only benefit wealthy urban centers. Sarah stood at the back, listening intently as heated debates unfolded. She saw familiar faces, neighbors who once shared her hopes but now wore expressions of doubt and anger. When it was her turn to speak, Sarah's voice was calm but passionate. "Change is never easy," she said, "but Teravolt could be the key to building a future where our children don't have to leave home to find work. We can't afford to wait for the future to come to us, we have to shape it ourselves." Some nodded, others remained unconvinced. The divide was clear. The day after the announcement, Sarah received a call from an organization called NextGen Detroit, a nonprofit working closely with Musk's team to integrate Teravolt into local communities. They invited her to apply for a community liaison role, a chance to be the bridge between the innovation and those it would affect most. The opportunity was thrilling but daunting. Sarah knew this meant stepping into a world dominated by tech elites and corporate interests, worlds far removed from the neighborhood she knew. She hesitated but decided to take the leap. As she began the application process, she faced immediate challenges. Bureaucracy, skepticism from community leaders, and political hurdles slowed progress. Some of her closest friends warned her to be careful, that the project might be more about optics than real change. Her father John was openly critical, accusing her of selling out to the tech overlords. "They don't care about people like us," he said one night over a tense dinner. "They just want to make money and control everything." Sarah felt the sting of his words but refused to back down. Meanwhile, Mark was her steady support, encouraging her to hold on to her ideals even when the system seemed stacked against her. "You're the kind of person who can make this work," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The political landscape around Teravolt grew complicated. City officials debated zoning laws and funding, while corporate partners pushed for faster implementation. Rumors swirled about the project's real costs and the risk of displacing vulnerable communities. Sarah found herself navigating a minefield of conflicting interests, trying to keep the focus on the people who needed help most. She organized community forums and listening sessions, hoping to build trust and open dialogue. These gatherings were emotionally charged, with stories of loss, fear, and hope spilling out. Sarah listened carefully, realizing that Teravolt's success depended not just on technology but on healing fractured communities and addressing real human needs. As Sarah's involvement deepened, she encountered resistance from unexpected places. A colleague at NextGen Detroit, Ethan Reynolds, initially friendly, began to distance himself as internal politics complicated the project. Sarah soon learned that Ethan had been feeding doubts about her commitment to a group of skeptical funders. The betrayal cut deep. Sarah confronted Ethan, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you try to undermine me when we're on the same side?" Ethan's answer was cold. "This isn't about sides. It's about who can deliver results. You're too emotional. The board wants someone who plays it safe." The moment shattered Sarah's confidence. She questioned whether her passion was a liability in a world ruled by pragmatism and power. But rather than retreat, she channeled her frustration into renewed determination. She reached out to community allies and supporters within NextGen Detroit who believed in her vision. With Mark's help, she devised a plan to prove TerraVolt's potential through a pilot program in one Detroit neighborhood. The pilot would showcase the technology's benefits and create real jobs, addressing the fears of skeptics head-on. Securing funding and approvals was an uphill battle. Sarah spent countless hours writing proposals, meeting with officials, and rallying community leaders. She faced setbacks, delays, budget cuts, and moments when it seemed the project would fall apart. Yet each challenge brought a small victory, a new partner joining, a successful community event, a technical breakthrough. Through it all, Sarah learned to navigate the complex world of innovation with grit and grace. As the pilot program took shape, Sarah became a symbol of hope for many in Detroit, a living example that the future could be shaped by people who refused to give up. The pilot's launch day was electric. Neighbors gathered to witness the activation of TerraVolt's solar nodes and the first autonomous transport pods rolling down their streets. Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief as children played near the new clean energy stations and workers began training for jobs the innovation created. But beneath the celebration, tension simmered. Critics remained vocal, pointing to lingering doubts about cost, privacy, and long-term impact. Sarah knew the journey was far from over. As she looked out at the crowd, she realized that TerraVolt wasn't just a technology, it was a test of America's ability to reinvent itself, to heal wounds old and new, and to build a future where no one was left behind. Sarah's fight had only just begun. Just as the TerraVolt pilot program began showing promising results, an unexpected crisis erupted that threatened to undo everything Sarah and her community had fought for. One morning, news broke that a major cyber attack had targeted the TerraVolt network, crippling its solar nodes and autonomous transport systems in Detroit and several other cities. Panic spread quickly. Headlines screamed about vulnerabilities and risks, and critics used the incident to fuel fears that the technology was unsafe and unreliable. Sarah woke up to a flood of messages from worried neighbors, anxious colleagues, and concerned funders. The dream of a better future suddenly felt fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. The cyber attack was not just a technical setback, it was a blow to the fragile trust Sarah had been building. The community forums filled with frustration and doubt. Maybe we should have waited, some said. Maybe this is too much, too fast. Sarah felt the weight of those doubts like a physical pressure on her chest. But she refused to let fear win. With Mark's support, she dove into damage control, organizing emergency meetings with cybersecurity experts and TerraVolt engineers. They worked around the clock to identify the source of the attack and implement stronger defenses. Sarah made public statements to reassure the community, emphasizing transparency and commitment to safety. Slowly, the repairs began to restore power and mobility in the pilot neighborhoods. The autonomous pods rolled back onto the streets, and solar panels hummed to life again. The resilience of the technology and the team brought a cautious sense of hope. At one community meeting, Sarah stood before a packed room, her voice steady despite exhaustion. This setback shows that innovation comes with risks, but also that we can overcome them together. TerraVolt isn't perfect, no system is. But it's a step toward a future where we control our destiny. The crowd responded with applause and renewed determination. This moment was a turning point. The crisis forced Sarah and her allies to strengthen not only the technology but the relationships that held the project together. She forged new partnerships with local universities to develop cybersecurity solutions and launched training programs to equip residents with digital skills, turning a vulnerability into an opportunity. Yet, just as hope blossomed, a new challenge emerged. A powerful lobbying group representing traditional energy interests launched a campaign against TerraVolt, spreading misinformation and pressuring lawmakers to halt the project. Their influence reached deep into political circles, threatening funding and regulatory approvals. Sarah found herself facing an uphill battle against entrenched power. The lobbyists' tactics were sophisticated and ruthless. They painted TerraVolt as a threat to jobs and the economy, appealing to fears of rapid change. Media outlets amplified these messages, creating a wave of skepticism that swept through communities beyond Detroit. Sarah's team scrambled to counter the narrative, organizing rallies, social media campaigns, and direct lobbying efforts. The pressure was intense, and internal disagreements began to surface within NextGen Detroit. Some members advocated for compromise to secure political support, while others urged a firm stance to protect the project's vision. Sarah felt torn. Compromise risked diluting TerraVolt's mission, but confrontation threatened to alienate potential allies. Amid this turmoil, Sarah's personal life also felt the strain. The long hours and relentless stress tested her relationship with Mark. Their once easy camaraderie grew tense as disagreements about strategy and priorities surfaced. One evening, after a heated discussion about whether to negotiate with the lobbyists, Mark questioned if the fight was worth the personal cost. "You're carrying too much, Sarah. You can't do this alone." His words echoed her own fears but also reminded her that support was essential. Sarah realized she needed to trust her allies more and delegate responsibilities. She convened a leadership meeting to address the divisions and chart a clear path forward. Through honest dialogue and shared purpose, the team united around a renewed commitment to transparency, community engagement, and advocacy. Meanwhile, the pilot program's early successes became harder to ignore. Independent studies showed TerraVolt reduced energy costs and pollution while creating hundreds of new jobs in Detroit. Local stories highlighted individuals like Maria, a single mother trained as a technician, who found steady work and hope for her family. These real-life impacts strengthened Sarah's resolve and helped shift public opinion. The lobbying group's campaign lost some momentum, but the fight was far from over. As political debates intensified, Sarah prepared for a critical vote that would determine TerraVolt's future funding. The stakes couldn't be higher. In the days leading up to the vote, Sarah met with community leaders, lawmakers, and activists, sharing the stories of those whose lives had been transformed by the project. She spoke with conviction about the need to embrace innovation with care, ensuring no one was left behind. On the eve of the vote, Sarah stood on the steps of Detroit City Hall, addressing a crowd gathered in support. Her voice rang out over the night air, filled with the raw emotion of someone who had risked everything for a better future. "This is our moment to choose hope over fear, progress over stagnation. TerraVolt isn't just a technology, it's a promise that we can build a future where everyone thrives." The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of energy that carried Sarah through a restless night. When the vote finally came, it was close, a razor-thin margin that reflected the deep divisions in the city and beyond. But in the end, TerraVolt's funding was secured, a victory that felt like the dawn after a long, dark night. The battle was far from over, but the hope that had carried Sarah through crisis and doubt now burned brighter than ever. She knew challenges awaited, new obstacles and twists in the road. But the journey had taught her the power of resilience, community, and belief in something greater than herself. As the first light of morning touched Detroit's skyline, Sarah stood ready to face whatever came next, confident that innovation, when guided by compassion and courage, could truly change America forever. With TerraVolt's funding secured and the pilot program gaining momentum, Sarah Bennett found herself thrust into an entirely new world, a world of cutting-edge technology, ambitious scientists, and high-stakes decisions that would test her limits in ways she had never imagined. The transition from community advocate to integral member of the TerraVolt project was exhilarating yet daunting. She had to quickly adapt to the fast-paced environment of Musk's innovation hub, located just outside Detroit, where every day brought fresh breakthroughs and unforeseen complications. The sprawling campus was a futuristic landscape of gleaming labs, solar arrays, and autonomous vehicles whirring silently along testing tracks. Walking through its corridors, Sarah felt a mixture of awe and determination. She was no longer on the sidelines, she was part of the engine driving a revolution. Her role was to bridge the gap between the engineers who spoke in technical jargon and the communities who needed clear answers and practical solutions. Early on, Sarah realized this was more complicated than she'd anticipated. The engineers were brilliant but sometimes dismissive of the social and economic realities outside their labs. Some saw community concerns as obstacles rather than essential perspectives. Sarah made it her mission to change that mindset, hosting workshops where scientists and community members could meet and exchange ideas openly. These sessions were intense and often fraught with tension, but gradually, trust began to build. Sarah shared stories of families struggling to pay utility bills or workers fearing job loss, while the engineers explained the intricacies of battery chemistry and AI-powered transport networks. Together, they began crafting solutions that balanced innovation with empathy. One breakthrough came when Sarah worked with a team to design a flexible job training program tailored to Detroit's workforce. This initiative not only taught technical skills but also emphasized resilience and adaptability, traits Sarah knew were vital for a future shaped by rapid change. Meanwhile, the TerraVolt technology itself was evolving. The initial solar and battery systems were upgraded with advanced materials that increased efficiency and durability. The autonomous pods began incorporating AI enhancements that improved safety and responsiveness. Each development brought new excitement but also new hurdles. Unexpected glitches appeared during field tests. Sometimes a transport pod would misinterpret sensor data, other times the energy grid would experience brief outages during peak demand. These setbacks triggered frustration and anxiety across the team. Sarah, however, remained a steady presence. She encouraged collaboration rather than blame, reminding everyone that innovation was a journey paved with trial and error. Outside the labs, the pilot neighborhoods continued to feel the impact of TerraVolt. Cleaner air, quieter streets, and new job opportunities began to reshape daily life. Yet, Sarah was acutely aware that beneath these improvements lay deeper challenges. Displacement fears persisted as rising property values threatened long-time residents. Infrastructure upgrades disrupted traffic and local businesses. Sarah worked closely with community leaders to address these issues, negotiating with city officials to implement protections like rent stabilization and small business support. As the months passed, Sarah's connection to the community deepened even as her role in the Innovation Hub expanded. She balanced late nights drafting reports and early mornings attending neighborhood meetings, driven by a fierce commitment to make sure progress didn't come at anyone's expense. Her relationship with Mark grew more complicated amid this whirlwind. Mark, still working in the tech sector, struggled to reconcile his admiration for Sarah's dedication with his concerns about the personal toll it was taking. They shared moments of tenderness and tension, quiet dinners filled with hopeful plans and heated debates about priorities. One afternoon, after a particularly stressful day at the Innovation Hub, Sarah and Mark took a walk through a revitalized Detroit park powered by TerraVolt. Watching children play beneath solar-powered lights, Sarah felt a bittersweet mix of hope and vulnerability. "Sometimes it feels like everything depends on this project," she admitted. "Like if we fail, it won't just be a setback for technology but a loss for everyone counting on change." Mark took her hand gently. "That's a lot to carry. But you're not alone. Remember that." Their bond strengthened, providing Sarah with emotional grounding amid the chaos. Yet the pressures were mounting beyond her personal life. New opposition emerged from unexpected quarters. A coalition of environmental groups voiced concerns about the sourcing of rare earth minerals used in TerraVolt's batteries, highlighting the ecological and ethical implications of mining operations abroad. This criticism sparked heated debates within the project and drew media attention, threatening to tarnish TerraVolt's image as a clean energy savior. Sarah found herself mediating between passionate activists and pragmatic engineers, seeking compromises that included increased transparency and commitments to sustainable sourcing. These negotiations were delicate, requiring patience and diplomacy. At the same time, federal regulators intensified scrutiny of TerraVolt's safety protocols, demanding exhaustive testing and documentation. The Innovation Hub ramped up efforts to comply, often pushing employees to their limits. Sarah advocated for fair work conditions and mental health resources, recognizing that the human cost of innovation was often overlooked. Amid the technical, social, and political storms, Sarah received unexpected news: Elon Musk himself wanted to meet her. The announcement was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Meeting the visionary behind TerraVolt was an opportunity to influence the project's direction but also a test of her credibility and resolve. The meeting took place in a sleek conference room overlooking the innovation campus. Musk was charismatic and intense, probing Sarah about community concerns, project challenges, and her vision for the future. Their conversation was a mix of strategy, philosophy, and personal stories. Musk expressed admiration for Sarah's tenacity and insight, acknowledging that the project's success hinged on people like her who bridged worlds. He challenged her to push harder, to think bigger. Innovation isn't just about technology, he said. It's about transforming society. If we don't get that right, everything else falls apart. Inspired and energized, Sarah left the meeting with renewed purpose. She realized that TerraVolt was more than a project, it was a movement that required relentless effort and unwavering belief. The path ahead promised greater challenges, technical breakthroughs, political battles, and profound ethical questions. But Sarah was ready. As summer turned to fall, TerraVolt expanded into neighboring cities, each with unique needs and obstacles. Sarah coordinated teams, refined strategies, and continued to listen closely to the voices of those affected. The journey was exhausting but deeply rewarding. Through every triumph and trial, Sarah transformed from a hopeful outsider into a leader who understood that true innovation meant embracing complexity, uncertainty, and humanity. The road was long and winding, but with every step, she moved closer to a future that could change America forever. The crisp autumn air filled the innovation hub as Sarah Bennett faced the biggest challenge of her journey yet. Months of progress and struggle had led to this moment, a public demonstration of TerraVolt's expanded system in a major city. The stakes were higher than ever. Media from across the nation gathered, politicians watched closely, and community leaders expected proof that this innovation could truly transform lives. But beneath the excitement, tension simmered. The previous cyber attacks' shadow lingered, and opposition forces had intensified their scrutiny, spreading doubts and accusations. Sarah knew that success today could silence critics, or if it failed, unravel everything. As the demonstration began, the city streets came alive with TerraVolt's electric pulse. Solar arrays glinted in the sunlight, autonomous pods glided smoothly along designated routes, and battery hubs hummed with energy. Crowds cheered as families boarded the pods, and local workers monitored the system's performance. Sarah moved through the crowd, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and anxiety. Then, suddenly, the system faltered. An unexpected glitch caused several pods to stop mid-route, stranding passengers and sparking confusion. Social media exploded with critical comments and live footage of frustrated riders. Sarah's phone buzzed relentlessly with urgent messages from engineers and city officials. The moment felt like a nightmare unfolding in real time. But then came the most harrowing news. An internal leak revealed that a trusted member of the TerraVolt team had sabotaged the system, motivated by a mix of fear, ideology, and personal grievance. The betrayal cut deeply into Sarah's trust and morale. She had built bridges on the foundation of collaboration and hope, only to see them fractured by one act of deception. The news ignited a firestorm of accusations and blame within the project and the community. Sarah found herself at the center of a whirlwind of anger, disappointment, and fear. Yet, amid the chaos, a profound truth emerged. The saboteurs' actions were driven by genuine concerns about the pace of change and its impact on vulnerable communities. This revelation forced Sarah to confront the complexity of progress, not as a straightforward path but as a tangled web of competing needs and fears. In the days that followed, Sarah organized a series of open forums where people could voice their doubts, frustrations, and hopes. The discussions were raw and emotional, peeling back layers of misunderstanding and pain. Through these dialogues, Sarah began to see how TerraVolt was not just about technology but about healing divisions and building trust. The experience transformed her approach. She realized that leadership required vulnerability as much as strength and that acknowledging fears was essential to moving forward. With renewed empathy, Sarah led efforts to repair the damage caused by the sabotage, both technical and relational. She worked closely with engineers to enhance security and with community leaders to rebuild confidence. The process was painstaking but necessary. Then came a breakthrough moment. A local family, who had lost their home to displacement fears linked to TerraVolt's expansion, shared their story publicly, appealing for compassion and action. Their plea touched hearts across the city and reignited the project's mission to prioritize people over profits. Inspired by their courage, Sarah championed new policies to protect affordable housing and support displaced residents, embedding social justice into TerraVolt's core values. The media coverage shifted from skepticism to cautious optimism. Supporters rallied, and new partnerships formed to address long-standing inequalities exacerbated by technological change. Meanwhile, Sarah's personal journey reached a turning point. The strain of recent events had tested her relationship with Mark, but through honest conversations and mutual support, they found renewed strength together. Mark became a steadfast ally, helping Sarah balance the demands of leadership with self-care. Their bond deepened, rooted in shared dreams and resilience. As winter approached, TerraVolt's system stabilized and expanded, demonstrating tangible benefits in energy savings, pollution reduction, and job creation. The sabotage, though painful, had sparked necessary reflection and growth. Sarah stood before a packed auditorium, addressing a crowd of supporters, critics, and curious onlookers. Her voice carried the weight of experience and hope. "Innovation is not a straight line," she said. "It's messy, challenging, and often uncomfortable. But it is also a journey toward a more just and sustainable future. TerraVolt is not perfect, but it is a promise to listen, to learn, and to build together." The audience rose in applause, a testament to the power of perseverance and truth. That night, as Sarah looked out over the city skyline, she felt a profound sense of purpose. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was ready to face it with courage, compassion, and unwavering belief that innovation, guided by humanity, could change America forever. The bitter cold of early winter swept through Detroit as Sarah Bennett stepped back into the heart of the TerraVolt project, her mind still echoing with the lessons of recent upheaval. The sabotage had shaken the foundation, but it had also forged new bonds, between engineers and community members, activists and politicians, skeptics and believers. Yet beneath the surface of this fragile unity, new challenges were quietly brewing. The political landscape was shifting rapidly. Opponents of TerraVolt had not disappeared, they had regrouped, adopting more subtle tactics. Instead of overt attacks, they now pushed complex legislative hurdles, demanding exhaustive environmental impact studies and new safety certifications that threatened to delay expansion indefinitely. Sarah and her team realized they were entering a new phase of the fight, one waged not on the streets or in headlines, but behind closed doors and in committee rooms. To navigate this terrain, Sarah began building alliances with unexpected partners. She reached out to local labor unions concerned about job security, convincing them that TerraVolt's growth could create sustainable employment if managed responsibly. She forged ties with minority business groups eager to participate in new supply chains and technology services. Together, they formed a coalition advocating for balanced policies that supported innovation while protecting workers and communities. At the same time, Sarah deepened collaboration with academic researchers, launching a series of impact studies to provide transparent data on TerraVolt's environmental and social effects. These studies were rigorous and sometimes critical, revealing areas for improvement that Sarah welcomed. She believed that honest self-assessment was vital to the project's credibility and success. Internally, the Innovation Hub was evolving too. The team was expanding, attracting experts from diverse backgrounds and disciplines. This influx of talent energized the project but also introduced new tensions. Differing opinions on priorities, ethics, and strategy sparked debates that sometimes threatened cohesion. Sarah found herself acting as mediator, balancing visionary goals with practical constraints. One late night, as snowflakes drifted past the window, Sarah convened a workshop aimed at aligning the team around shared values and mission. The session was intense, peeling back layers of frustration and misunderstanding. By its end, the group emerged more united, with a renewed commitment to transparency, inclusivity, and adaptability. Meanwhile, Teravolt's technology was advancing in leaps and bounds. Engineers unveiled a next-generation battery design that promised greater efficiency and longer lifespans. Autonomous vehicles integrated new AI algorithms that improved navigation in complex urban environments. Each breakthrough brought excitement but also new questions about scalability, ethics, and access. Sarah advocated for pilot programs in diverse communities to ensure the technology served all populations equitably. As winter deepened, Sarah's personal life took on new dimensions. Mark surprised her with a proposal, not just of marriage but of partnership in the broader mission. He wanted to contribute his tech expertise to Teravolt, helping bridge gaps between innovation and social impact. Their engagement was a beacon of hope amid the storm of challenges, symbolizing the power of love and collaboration. Yet the path was far from smooth. Just as the coalition prepared for a major policy hearing, a whistleblower leaked internal documents suggesting that some Teravolt suppliers had questionable labor practices overseas. The revelation ignited a firestorm of criticism and threatened to undo months of trust building. Sarah was devastated. She had fought so hard to anchor the project in ethics and justice, only to see shadows cast by distant corners of the supply chain. The crisis forced a reckoning. Sarah led a full-scale investigation, halting contracts with offending suppliers and implementing rigorous ethical standards and audits. She communicated openly with the public, acknowledging mistakes and outlining corrective actions. The response was mixed, some praised the transparency, others remained skeptical. Through it all, Sarah leaned on her growing network of allies and her unwavering belief that mistakes were part of the journey toward genuine progress. As the hearing approached, the coalition mobilized community members, experts, and advocates to testify in support of Teravolt's continued funding and expansion. The testimony was powerful, filled with stories of hope, resilience, and vision. The hearing became a turning point, showcasing how innovation could be a force for good when rooted in accountability and community engagement. After a tense deliberation, policymakers voted to approve Teravolt's next phase, with conditions emphasizing ethical sourcing, labor rights, and environmental stewardship. The victory was hard-won and fragile but marked a milestone in the project's evolution. Reflecting on the tumultuous months, Sarah felt a deepening sense of maturity and clarity. She understood now that true innovation was as much about navigating human complexities as about technical breakthroughs. It demanded humility, courage, and a commitment to justice that transcended convenience or expediency. As the snow began to melt and spring hinted at its arrival, Sarah stood once more on the rooftop of the Innovation Hub, gazing at a city transformed by hope and hard work. The journey was far from over. New challenges awaited, political storms, ethical dilemmas, and the ever-present tension between progress and preservation. But Sarah knew she was not alone. Together, they were building more than a technology, they were crafting a future where America could reinvent itself, one solar panel, one autonomous pod, and one brave choice at a time. Spring arrived with a burst of color and energy, but beneath Detroit's blossoming trees, the battle for Teravolt's future intensified. Sarah Bennett knew that the momentum they had gained was fragile. Political opponents, corporate rivals, and wary citizens all scrutinized every move the project made. The stakes had never been higher. The latest phase of Teravolt's expansion aimed to connect multiple cities across the Midwest with a grid of clean energy and autonomous transit, a bold vision promising to revolutionize how people lived and worked. But the plan was also the largest and most complex yet, demanding unprecedented coordination, resources, and trust. Sarah spent countless hours in meetings with city officials, engineers, and community leaders, navigating a maze of regulations, competing interests, and logistical challenges. Each negotiation required careful diplomacy and strategic thinking. One morning, a surprise announcement jolted the team. A major energy conglomerate, seeing TerraVolt as a direct threat to its fossil fuel profits, launched a public relations campaign questioning the safety and reliability of TerraVolt's technology. They cited rare incidents and exaggerated risks, aiming to sow doubt among investors and the public. The media frenzy that followed was intense and demoralizing. Social media exploded with misinformation, and some politicians began to waver in their support. Sarah and her team worked frantically to counter the narrative, releasing transparent data, inviting independent experts to validate their technology, and amplifying stories of positive impact from pilot communities. Yet, the campaign revealed how deeply entrenched the opposition was and how fiercely vested interests fought to maintain the status quo. Internally, the pressure took a toll. Engineers worked overtime to resolve emerging glitches in the system, community outreach teams managed growing anxiety among residents, and Sarah found herself mediating increasingly heated debates about priorities and ethics within TerraVolt's leadership. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Sarah received a call from Dr. Anita Flores, a renowned environmental scientist advising the project. Anita warned of an urgent problem. A key component in TerraVolt's batteries relied on a rare mineral sourced from a politically unstable region. Supply disruptions threatened to derail production just as demand surged. The news was a harsh reminder of the global complexities woven into the project's local aspirations. Sarah immediately convened a crisis meeting, involving procurement officers, engineers, and ethical sourcing experts. They brainstormed alternatives, new materials, recycled sources, domestic suppliers, but each option came with trade-offs in cost, performance, or timeline. The dilemma underscored the tension between innovation's promises and the practical realities of globalization. At the same time, community tensions flared anew. As TerraVolt's infrastructure projects expanded, some neighborhoods expressed fears of gentrification and displacement. Protests erupted outside construction sites, with residents demanding stronger guarantees for affordable housing and local hiring. Sarah understood the fears deeply. She had witnessed similar struggles in her own life and in the stories shared by the families she'd come to know. She doubled down on engagement efforts, meeting with activists and residents to listen and negotiate. Together, they developed enhanced community benefit agreements that included rent stabilization measures, job training programs, and investment in local schools. The process was challenging and imperfect, but it built crucial bridges. Meanwhile, Sarah's relationship with Mark faced new tests. The relentless pace and public scrutiny strained their bond. Mark's own work pressures mounted, and moments of doubt crept in. Yet, their shared commitment to the mission and honest communication helped them weather the storms. One quiet night, they found solace in a simple walk along the Detroit River, reconnecting amid the city's shimmering lights. As the expansion plans moved forward, Sarah encountered an unexpected ally, Senator James Caldwell, a pragmatic legislator from Ohio with a reputation for bridging partisan divides. Caldwell had been quietly observing TerraVolt's progress and saw its potential to revitalize struggling Midwestern economies. He proposed a bipartisan coalition to support clean energy innovation, emphasizing job creation and infrastructure renewal. Sarah welcomed the opportunity, recognizing the power of political support to overcome obstacles. The coalition's formation energized the movement, attracting new funding and media attention. However, the opposition adapted quickly, leveraging legal challenges and bureaucratic delays to stall progress. A series of court cases questioned environmental permits and contract awards, dragging the project into costly and protracted battles. Sarah navigated the legal labyrinth with a combination of legal counsel, public advocacy, and grassroots mobilization. She rallied supporters to attend hearings, write letters, and share their stories. The struggle tested her endurance and resolve but also highlighted the power of collective action. Through it all, TerraVolt's technology continued to improve. The autonomous pods were equipped with enhanced AI, allowing them to navigate complex urban landscapes with greater safety and efficiency. Battery systems incorporated breakthroughs in energy density and recyclability. Pilot cities reported significant drops in pollution and energy costs, tangible evidence of the project's promise. Yet, Sarah knew that technology alone would not win the future. The project's true success depended on building an inclusive vision that addressed social justice, environmental stewardship, and economic opportunity. In this crucible of challenges and hope, Sarah emerged stronger, more determined, and wiser. She recognized that transformation was neither linear nor easy but was forged through resilience, empathy, and collaboration. As summer approached, the Midwest stood on the cusp of a clean energy revolution, with TerraVolt poised to lead the charge. The battle for America's future was underway. And Sarah Bennett was at its heart, ready to face whatever came next. The summer sun beat down on the TerraVolt headquarters as Sarah Bennett stood at a crossroads unlike any she had faced before. The project had grown far beyond its initial scope, weaving itself into the fabric of Midwestern cities and capturing national attention. Yet with growth came new pressures, ethical dilemmas, political battles, and the weight of expectations from millions counting on the promise of a cleaner, fairer future. In the weeks leading up to the annual Clean Energy Summit in Chicago, Sarah found herself pulled in multiple directions. The summit was more than a conference, it was a stage where TerraVolt could showcase its progress, secure critical funding, and set the tone for America's energy transition. But the stakes were higher than ever. Recent controversies had stirred doubts among key investors, and rivals were poised to challenge TerraVolt's leadership in front of a global audience. The night before the summit, Sarah sat alone in her office, reflecting on the journey. The memories flooded back, the late nights poring over technical details, the community meetings filled with raw emotion, the betrayals and breakthroughs that had shaped her path. She realized that the project had become more than a technological innovation, it was a movement fueled by the dreams and struggles of countless people. As dawn broke, Sarah's team gathered for a final rehearsal. Mark, ever supportive, reviewed the presentation's technical sections, while advisors refined the messaging to balance optimism with honesty. The atmosphere was tense but electric. When the summit began, Sarah stepped onto the stage to a packed auditorium. Cameras flashed, and a hush fell over the crowd. She opened with a question that echoed her own journey: what if innovation could heal the divisions that have long divided our communities? What if the future was one where technology and humanity walked hand in hand? The presentation unfolded with precision and passion. Sarah highlighted TerraVolt's milestones: solar arrays powering tens of thousands of homes, autonomous pods connecting neighborhoods, job programs uplifting displaced workers. She acknowledged challenges openly, from supply chain issues to ethical concerns, underscoring the project's commitment to transparency and continuous improvement. The response was mixed but hopeful. Investors expressed cautious interest, policymakers nodded in approval, and community leaders shared applause. Yet amid the accolades, Sarah sensed undercurrents of skepticism. Later, in a private meeting, a top venture capitalist warned Sarah bluntly: TerraVolt needed to accelerate profitability or risk losing critical backing. The pressure to balance mission with money loomed large. That evening, Sarah and Mark walked the city streets, the Chicago skyline glowing in the distance. They discussed the tension between ideals and realities, wondering how to sustain their vision in a world driven by profits and politics. Meanwhile, back at TerraVolt, internal debates grew fiercer. Some executives pushed for faster expansion into lucrative urban markets, arguing that scale would solidify financial footing. Others, including Sarah, insisted on deepening community partnerships and addressing social equity, even if growth slowed. The clash revealed the complex balance between growth and values. As summer unfolded, new challenges emerged. A data breach exposed sensitive project information, raising fears of corporate espionage. The security team scrambled to contain the fallout, and Sarah faced the delicate task of reassuring partners and the public without compromising transparency. At the same time, climate events intensified across the country. Heat waves, floods, and wildfires underscored the urgent need for solutions like TerraVolt but also complicated infrastructure plans. Sarah engaged with climate scientists and disaster response teams to adapt systems for resilience, recognizing that innovation had to be flexible and responsive to a changing world. Personal pressures mounted as well. The relentless pace strained Sarah's health and her relationship with Mark, who juggled his own demanding career. Moments of doubt and fatigue tested their bond, but their shared purpose offered a steady anchor. One afternoon, Sarah received a surprise visit from a young activist named Maya, who had emerged as a vocal critic of TerraVolt's early community engagement. Maya shared stories of families still struggling with displacement fears and economic insecurity. The conversation was honest and raw, forcing Sarah to confront gaps between vision and lived reality. Inspired by Maya's courage, Sarah invited her to join a newly formed advisory council to help shape TerraVolt's social policies. The inclusion marked a turning point, an acknowledgement that true progress required listening to diverse voices, even those born from frustration. As summer faded into fall, TerraVolt prepared for the next phase, integrating a groundbreaking energy storage technology that could revolutionize grid stability. The announcement attracted global attention but also intensified scrutiny. Rival companies launched campaigns questioning the new technology's safety and feasibility, and regulatory hurdles threatened delays. Sarah faced a daunting decision, whether to proceed aggressively or adopt a more cautious approach. Drawing on her experiences, she chose a path of measured optimism, emphasizing rigorous testing and community involvement. The decision earned respect but required patience and resilience. On a chilly autumn evening, Sarah stood once again on the rooftop of the TerraVolt hub, watching the city lights flicker. The journey had been arduous, marked by victories and setbacks, joys and heartbreaks. Yet she felt a deep sense of purpose and hope. America's future was not predetermined, it was a story being written every day by people daring to imagine and build something better. In that moment, Sarah understood that the true power of innovation lay not just in technology but in the courage to face uncertainty, embrace complexity, and hold fast to the belief that progress was possible, if only they dared to lead. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The crisp chill of early autumn settled over Detroit as Sarah Bennett stood at a pivotal moment in TerraVolt's journey. The project had grown from an ambitious idea into a sprawling, multifaceted initiative promising to reshape America's energy landscape. But with growth came growing pains, and Sarah now faced challenges that tested every ounce of her leadership and resolve. The rollout of the new energy storage technology had proven more complex than anticipated. Despite rigorous testing and cautious optimism, unexpected technical glitches surfaced, causing intermittent outages in some pilot cities. These failures were amplified by a relentless media cycle eager to spotlight any flaw, painting TerraVolt as unreliable and risky. Sarah felt the sting of criticism deeply. She had invested so much heart and soul into the project, and to see it questioned on the national stage was a harsh blow. Yet, retreat was not an option. With Mark's steady support, she doubled down on efforts to diagnose and resolve the issues. Engineers worked around the clock, running simulations, redesigning components, and coordinating with local utilities to stabilize the grid. Transparency became a cornerstone of their approach. Weekly updates were shared publicly, including setbacks and plans for improvement. The candor won some praise but also intensified scrutiny from regulators and competitors. Meanwhile, political opposition coalesced around a new coalition lobbying to restrict TerraVolt's expansion, citing safety concerns and economic fears. Sarah attended hearings where community members testified both for and against the project, revealing a complex web of hopes, anxieties, and conflicting interests. Among the critics were small business owners worried about rising costs and labor unions demanding stronger guarantees for workers transitioning from fossil fuel industries. Sarah realized that technology alone could not solve these challenges. She needed to build bridges with diverse stakeholders, even those skeptical of her vision. To that end, she launched a series of town halls and listening sessions, inviting dialogue and collaboration. These meetings were sometimes tense but often productive, fostering new ideas and partnerships. One unexpected breakthrough came from a local union leader named Carlos Ramirez, who proposed a joint apprenticeship program linking TerraVolt's technical teams with displaced workers. The initiative promised to create thousands of new jobs while addressing skills gaps. Sarah embraced the idea wholeheartedly, seeing it as a model for inclusive growth. As the months passed, TerraVolt's technical team finally stabilized the energy storage system. New software algorithms improved efficiency, and hardware refinements reduced failure rates dramatically. Pilot cities reported restored and improved service, gradually rebuilding public trust. The turnaround was celebrated as a triumph of perseverance and innovation. Yet, just as hope began to return, Sarah faced a personal crisis. A confidential report leaked, suggesting that some TerraVolt board members were engaging in insider trading related to the company's stock. The scandal rocked the project's reputation, threatening investor confidence and public goodwill. Sarah was horrified by the betrayal. She launched an immediate internal investigation, working with legal experts and ethics committees to uncover the truth and hold those responsible accountable. The process was painful, exposing fractures within the leadership and raising questions about governance. Sarah confronted difficult decisions about transparency versus damage control, ultimately choosing full disclosure and decisive action. Several board members resigned or were removed, and new governance policies emphasizing ethics and accountability were implemented. The scandal was a sobering lesson about the vulnerabilities of even the most visionary projects. Amid the turmoil, Sarah's relationship with Mark was tested anew. The pressure, long hours, and public scrutiny strained their bond. They faced moments of doubt and exhaustion but found strength in shared values and honest communication. Together, they committed to carving out space for their personal lives amid the storm. In the midst of crisis, a new source of inspiration emerged from the youth. Maya, the activist Sarah had invited to the advisory council, organized a youth-led campaign to raise awareness about climate justice and equitable innovation. Their energy and creativity injected fresh momentum into the project, reminding Sarah of the importance of intergenerational collaboration. Inspired, Sarah expanded TerraVolt's educational outreach, partnering with schools and universities to cultivate the next generation of innovators and advocates. As the year drew to a close, TerraVolt's trajectory was no longer a straight line of progress but a dynamic, often turbulent journey marked by setbacks, breakthroughs, and hard-earned lessons. Sarah reflected on how far they had come, from a bold idea to a national movement, and how much further they still had to go. The future was uncertain, but the commitment to building a better America through innovation, justice, and community had never been clearer. Standing once again on the rooftop of the TerraVolt hub, Sarah gazed out at the city skyline, illuminated against the night. She felt the weight of responsibility but also a profound sense of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but with resilience, collaboration, and vision, the promise of a new American future was within reach. Winter had settled over the Midwest, blanketing Detroit and surrounding cities in snow, but inside TerraVolt's sleek headquarters, tensions burned hotter than ever. The energy storage breakthrough that had restored hope was now overshadowed by an intensifying battle for control within and outside the project. Sarah Bennett found herself navigating a minefield of competing interests, corporate boardroom power plays, political maneuvering, and a growing wave of public distrust fueled by misinformation and fear. The insider trading scandal had left TerraVolt's leadership fractured. New board members brought fresh perspectives but also new agendas. Some pushed aggressively for rapid commercialization and expansion into lucrative markets, eager to capitalize on TerraVolt's technology before competitors caught up. Others, including Sarah, championed a more measured approach that balanced growth with social responsibility and environmental stewardship. The divisions simmered beneath the surface but occasionally erupted into heated debates during executive meetings. One particularly fraught session saw accusations flying about the company's strategic direction, budget allocations, and transparency with stakeholders. Sarah, exhausted yet resolute, reminded the team of their shared mission, to build a sustainable and equitable future for America. Outside the walls of TerraVolt, opposition forces mobilized with renewed vigor. A coalition of fossil fuel interests, skeptical politicians, and fear-driven activists launched a coordinated campaign to undermine public support. They flooded social media with alarming headlines, organized protests in key cities, and lobbied regulators to impose stricter controls. The campaign exploited recent technical glitches and the insider trading scandal to sow doubt, painting TerraVolt as reckless and untrustworthy. Sarah knew that winning hearts and minds required more than facts and data; it demanded empathy, connection, and authentic engagement. She spearheaded a community outreach blitz, visiting neighborhoods affected by TerraVolt's infrastructure projects, listening to concerns, and sharing the vision for a cleaner, fairer future. At a packed town hall in Cleveland, she faced pointed questions about potential job losses in traditional energy sectors and fears of displacement. Sarah acknowledged these fears openly and unveiled new workforce transition programs, job retraining initiatives, and local investment plans designed to ensure no community was left behind. The response was mixed, but many appreciated the honesty and commitment to partnership. In parallel, TerraVolt's tech team faced an unexpected challenge when a competitor unveiled a rival battery technology claiming superior performance and lower costs. The announcement shook investor confidence and triggered a market dip. Sarah convened emergency strategy sessions to assess the threat and chart a path forward. They accelerated research and development, doubling down on improving reliability, safety, and sustainability. Collaborations with leading universities and startups injected fresh ideas and expertise into the project. Meanwhile, Sarah's personal life bore the strain of the relentless pace. Mark struggled to balance his own demanding career with supporting Sarah through the highs and lows. Late nights and missed anniversaries took their toll. A rare moment of vulnerability came when Mark surprised Sarah with a quiet dinner at home, reminding her of the importance of grounding and connection amid chaos. The gesture rekindled their bond and renewed Sarah's resolve. A turning point arrived when Maya and the Youth Advisory Council launched a viral social media campaign highlighting TerraVolt's impact on local communities and climate action. The campaign featured powerful testimonials, vibrant visuals, and a call to action that resonated nationwide. The wave of grassroots support countered opposition narratives and energized the project's base. Sarah seized the moment, organizing a national summit on clean energy justice that brought together activists, policymakers, scientists, and industry leaders to forge new alliances and commitments. As winter deepened, TerraVolt prepared to launch its next major pilot, a fully integrated smart grid combining renewable energy, autonomous transit, and energy storage in a Midwestern city. The project promised to be a showcase for the future of urban living but also a high-stakes test. The stakes felt personal for Sarah. She understood that success here could shift the national conversation and secure TerraVolt's place as a leader in innovation. Failure could set the movement back years. On launch day, amid swirling snowflakes and palpable anticipation, the pilot city's mayor cut the ceremonial ribbon. The smart grid hummed to life, pods gliding silently along streets, solar arrays capturing winter sun, batteries storing power with newfound efficiency. Initial reports showed promising results: reduced emissions, smoother commutes, and engaged citizens. Yet challenges remained: technical glitches, regulatory hurdles, and ongoing community concerns tested the team's agility and empathy. Throughout it all, Sarah reflected on how far the project had come, from an idea sparked by Elon Musk's vision to a complex, living ecosystem entwined with people's hopes and fears. The fight for America's future was no longer just about technology, it was about values, justice, and the courage to lead amid uncertainty. As she stood watching the city lights flicker against the snow-covered streets, Sarah felt a renewed spark of determination. The path ahead was daunting, but the promise of transformation, of a country powered by innovation, compassion, and resilience, was worth every battle. The early months of the new year arrived with an uneasy tension in the air. TerraVolt's ambitious smart grid pilot was operational, but the path to success was anything but smooth. Sarah Bennett felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever as she navigated the shifting landscape of innovation, politics, and human lives entwined in the project. The pilot city, Cedar Falls, had become a microcosm of America's broader energy transformation struggle. On one hand, the streets buzzed with autonomous electric pods weaving seamlessly between homes powered by teravolt solar arrays and energy storage units. On the other, whispers of doubt, discontent, and resistance lingered in neighborhood cafes and city council meetings. A sudden, severe winter storm struck the region, testing the resilience of the new infrastructure. Power outages swept through older parts of the city, while the smart grid's decentralized system managed to maintain service for most residents in the pilot zones. Still, the disruption sparked a media frenzy questioning the reliability of Teravolt's technology. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly around the clock, coordinating emergency responses and communicating openly with the public. The crisis underscored both the promise and the fragility of the new system. At the same time, political pressure intensified. A faction of state legislators, backed by fossil fuel lobbyists, proposed legislation to restrict Teravolt's operations and impose costly regulatory hurdles. The bill threatened to stall expansion and undermine investor confidence. Sarah mobilized her allies, including community leaders, environmental groups, and tech innovators, launching a public campaign to advocate for clean energy policies. The campaign harnessed social media, public forums, and direct lobbying efforts, highlighting Teravolt's role in job creation, environmental protection, and community empowerment. Meanwhile, the personal toll on Sarah deepened. The endless cycle of crises, public scrutiny, and internal conflicts wore on her health and relationships. A rare moment of solace came when Maya, now a respected voice in the clean energy movement, visited Sarah with news of a grassroots coalition gaining momentum. The coalition united diverse communities around shared goals of environmental justice and technological equity. Inspired, Sarah expanded Teravolt's community engagement efforts, launching new initiatives to address affordable housing, digital access, and workforce development. The project began to feel less like a corporate endeavor and more like a collective movement. Yet challenges loomed large. A whistleblower inside Teravolt raised concerns about data privacy and potential surveillance associated with the smart grid's monitoring systems. The revelation sparked a firestorm of debate about the balance between innovation and individual rights. Sarah responded swiftly, commissioning an independent audit and pledging to implement strict privacy safeguards. The incident became a defining moment, an opportunity to reaffirm Teravolt's commitment to ethical innovation and transparency. Amid the turmoil, Sarah found herself confronting her own doubts and fears. Late one night, alone in her office, she reflected on the journey, the sacrifices, the setbacks, the moments of triumph. She realized that leadership meant not just steering a project but embracing vulnerability, learning from mistakes, and staying grounded in core values. The tipping point was near. As spring blossomed, Teravolt secured a landmark partnership with the federal government to scale its technology nationwide. The announcement sparked celebrations but also intensified opposition. The battles ahead would test every lesson Sarah had learned about resilience, collaboration, and courage. Standing on the rooftop of the Teravolt hub, overlooking the city awakening to a new day, Sarah felt the pulse of possibility. The dream was no longer just hers, it belonged to millions who believed in a future shaped by innovation and compassion. The fight for that future had reached a critical moment. The choices made now would echo for generations. Sarah knew the road ahead would be rugged, but she also knew that together, they could rise, transforming America, one spark at a time. As spring unfolded in full bloom, Sarah Bennett found herself battling not just the physical challenges of innovation but the invisible war of perception and politics that threatened to unravel everything Teravolt had worked for. The national rollout plan was ambitious, revolutionary even, promising to transform cities across America with clean energy and smart technology. But the opposition was fiercer and more sophisticated than anyone had anticipated. The fossil fuel lobby had deep pockets and powerful allies in Congress, and they were deploying every tactic to slow TerraVault's progress. Misinformation campaigns flooded social media, spreading fear about job losses, technological failures, and privacy violations. The general public, already overwhelmed by a flood of conflicting news, grew skeptical. Sarah understood that facts alone wouldn't cut through the noise. They needed to connect emotionally with people. To show the human side of the story, the lives changed, the communities empowered. She organized a nationwide tour, bringing TerraVault ambassadors and impacted families to share their experiences firsthand. One poignant stop was in Appalachia, where former coal miners spoke about the transition to clean energy jobs through TerraVault's apprenticeship programs. Their stories of hardship and hope moved audiences and media alike, shifting narratives and building bridges. At the same time, TerraVault's technical teams pushed forward, refining the smart grid and storage systems to address glitches and enhance security. The whistleblower incident from the previous year had heightened awareness of privacy concerns, and new encryption protocols were implemented to protect user data rigorously. Sarah spearheaded an initiative to make TerraVault's technology more accessible, launching affordable home energy kits and community solar programs designed to reach underserved neighborhoods. These efforts helped counter accusations that the innovation favored wealthy urban areas, highlighting a commitment to equity and inclusion. But political battles continued. A contentious Senate hearing became a national spectacle, with TerraVault's leadership defending the project against sharp questions from skeptics. Sarah testified with calm conviction, emphasizing the science, the social benefits, and the vision for a resilient America. Behind the scenes, intense negotiations unfolded, with lobbyists and allies working tirelessly to secure legislative support. The stakes were high, not just for TerraVault, but for the future of clean energy in America. Amid these external pressures, internal challenges simmered. Some board members and investors grew restless with the slow pace of profitability, pushing for cost-cutting measures that clashed with Sarah's ethical priorities. Tensions flared during executive meetings, threatening to fracture the team. Sarah worked to mediate, emphasizing the long-term vision and the importance of staying true to their values. On a personal level, Sarah's relationship with Mark weathered storms of its own. The demands of the project left little time for rest or connection, and moments of tension threatened to pull them apart. But through open communication and mutual support, they found ways to sustain their bond, reminding each other why they had embarked on this journey together. A breakthrough came when Maya's Youth Coalition launched a viral campaign celebrating TerraVault's community impact, sparking renewed public enthusiasm. Their grassroots energy injected hope and momentum into the movement, reminding Sarah of the power of collective action. As summer approached, TerraVault prepared for a major milestone, the launch of a fully integrated smart city prototype combining energy, transit, and digital infrastructure in a mid-sized American city. The project was a bold experiment, a test of technology and trust. The day of the launch arrived amid swirling anticipation and media frenzy. Sarah stood at the forefront, feeling the weight of history and possibility. As the city lights flickered on powered by TerraVault systems, there was a palpable sense of awe and hope. But challenges remained, technical hiccups, lingering doubts, and fierce political opposition. Sarah knew the fight was far from over, but in that moment, the promise of transformation shone bright. Standing on the rooftop of the TerraVault hub, gazing at the glowing city below, Sarah felt a renewed resolve. The battle for America's future was a marathon, not a sprint, and she was ready to run every mile. The summer sun beat down relentlessly on Detroit as Sarah Bennett stood at the crossroads of TerraVault's future. The smart city prototype had launched with much fanfare, lighting up the skyline and capturing the nation's imagination. Yet beneath the celebration lurked mounting challenges that threatened to derail everything. The integration of cutting-edge technology into daily life exposed fault lines in infrastructure, regulation, and trust. Despite months of preparation, unexpected glitches emerged, traffic algorithms occasionally malfunctioned, causing jams, the energy storage system faltered during peak demand, and cybersecurity vulnerabilities raised alarms. The media seized upon these setbacks, framing them as signs of overreach and recklessness. Sarah felt the sting of criticism keenly. She had poured her soul into TerraVolt, believing in the power of innovation to change lives. Now, doubts crept in. Was the dream too big, too fast? Meanwhile, political opposition sharpened its attacks. Legislators aligned with fossil fuel interests intensified efforts to impose regulatory barriers, arguing that TerraVolt's expansion threatened economic stability and personal freedoms. Public hearings turned into battlegrounds, with fiery exchanges and protests. Sarah, always a steadfast presence, found herself increasingly isolated in the corridors of power. Some board members questioned her leadership, advocating for a more cautious approach or even selling the company to larger corporations. The internal discord was painful but not unexpected. The pressures of innovation often bred conflict. Sarah leaned on her closest allies, Mark, Maya, and Carlos, who reminded her of the bigger picture and the lives at stake. She knew the path forward required difficult choices and unwavering resolve. On a personal level, Sarah grappled with the toll the project exacted on her health and relationships. Sleepless nights, missed family events, and constant public scrutiny weighed heavily. A moment of clarity came during a rare visit to her hometown in Ohio, where she reconnected with old friends and revisited her roots. The visit rekindled her sense of purpose, reminding her why she had embarked on this journey, to create a future where communities like hers could thrive. Back in Detroit, TerraVolt doubled down on community engagement, launching new programs aimed at addressing economic disparities and ensuring equitable access to technology. Partnerships with local organizations created job training, affordable housing initiatives, and digital literacy workshops. These efforts began to shift public perception, illustrating TerraVolt's commitment beyond profit. At the same time, the tech team worked tirelessly to resolve operational glitches. New software updates improved system reliability, while rigorous cybersecurity protocols were implemented. The company also invested heavily in transparency, inviting independent auditors and opening data to public review. The shift toward openness helped rebuild trust incrementally. Yet the battle was far from over. A high-profile data breach rocked the company, compromising sensitive user information and fueling fears about privacy. The scandal threatened to undo months of progress. Sarah responded swiftly, taking personal responsibility and leading a comprehensive overhaul of security measures. The incident became a defining moment, one that tested TerraVolt's integrity and resilience. Through it all, Sarah's leadership evolved. She learned to balance vision with pragmatism, passion with patience. The journey demanded not only innovation but humility, empathy, and the courage to admit mistakes and adapt. As autumn's first leaves fell, TerraVolt prepared for the next phase, scaling smart grid technology to rural and underserved communities. The initiative aimed to close the digital and energy divide, bringing the benefits of clean technology to those long left behind. Sarah saw this as a crucial step in fulfilling TerraVolt's promise. Standing once again on the rooftop of TerraVolt's hub, watching the city pulse with life beneath her, Sarah felt the weight of the journey and the promise of what lay ahead. The road had been steep and fraught with challenges, but the vision endured. America's future was still being written, and she was ready to lead the way, one bold step at a time. The crisp autumn air in Detroit carried a sharpness that matched the mounting tensions inside TerraVolt's headquarters. Sarah Bennett sat in the glass-walled conference room, her gaze steady despite the storm brewing around her. The company was at a critical juncture, and every decision felt like a tipping point. The fallout from the recent data breach had rattled confidence both within the company and among the public. Investors grew jittery, regulatory scrutiny intensified, and the opposition capitalized on every misstep. Sarah felt the pressure acutely, knowing that the future of TerraVolt, and the clean energy revolution, hung in the balance. But it wasn't just the external battles that tested her resolve. Deep in her mind, old memories stirred, echoes from her past that refused to stay buried. Growing up in a small Ohio town, Sarah had witnessed firsthand the hardships faced by families caught in economic decline. Her father's factory had closed when she was a teenager, thrusting her family into uncertainty and struggle. Those early experiences had forged her fierce determination to create change. Now, as TerraVolt aimed to transform America's energy landscape, Sarah grappled with the weight of those personal histories entwined with her mission. A surprise visit from her mother brought a moment of reflection. Over a quiet dinner in Sarah's modest apartment, they spoke candidly about sacrifice, hope, and the cost of ambition. Her mother's gentle wisdom reminded Sarah of the roots grounding her dreams. Meanwhile, the internal dynamics at TerraVolt reached a breaking point. The boardroom was divided, with some executives pushing for aggressive expansion and others urging caution. The tension culminated in a dramatic meeting where Sarah had to defend her leadership and vision. Drawing on her deep knowledge, emotional intelligence, and unyielding commitment, she made a compelling case for balanced growth rooted in ethics and community impact. The vote of confidence that followed was narrow but decisive, a testament to the complexity of the challenges ahead. As the company steadied, new opportunities emerged. TerraVolt secured a groundbreaking partnership with a consortium of rural cooperatives to bring smart grid technology to underserved areas. The initiative promised to address energy inequality and spur economic revitalization. Sarah saw this as a chance to fulfill a promise made long ago. To create a future where no community was left behind. But with progress came new obstacles. Implementation in rural regions proved complex, with infrastructure gaps, regulatory red tape, and cultural resistance to change. Sarah and her team adopted a hands-on approach, spending weeks on the ground listening, learning, and collaborating with local leaders. These efforts built trust and tailored solutions that honored community needs. Amid these challenges, Sarah found strength in her relationships. Mark's unwavering support grounded her during sleepless nights and high-stakes decisions. Maya's youthful energy and fresh perspectives injected optimism and creativity. Carlos's technical brilliance solved seemingly insurmountable problems. Together, they formed a resilient core, united by shared purpose and mutual respect. A turning point came when a powerful story went viral, a rural family whose life had transformed thanks to TerraVolt's clean energy access. Their testimony inspired countless others and reshaped the national conversation. The momentum rekindled hope within TerraVolt and beyond. Yet, as the company looked toward scaling and sustainability, Sarah confronted a sobering truth: progress demanded sacrifice, patience, and the courage to face failure head-on. The journey was far from linear, marked by setbacks and breakthroughs, losses and victories. As she stood once more atop the TerraVolt hub, watching the autumn leaves swirl against the fading light, Sarah felt a profound mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The past and present had collided, forging a path forward illuminated by resilience and vision. America's energy future was still unfolding, and Sarah was ready to meet it head-on. The crisp winds of early winter swept through Detroit, carrying with them a sense of urgency and change. Sarah Bennett found herself standing at the crossroads once again, but this time the stakes were higher, and the battlefield more complex. TerraVolt's nationwide rollout had stirred deep currents beneath the surface, economic interests clashed, public opinion swayed, and the very future of clean energy innovation teetered precariously. The battles fought in courtrooms and boardrooms felt abstract, yet the real war was in the hearts and minds of everyday Americans. Sarah realized that to move forward, TerraVolt would need more than technology and lobbying, it would require building unexpected alliances. The realization hit her during a community forum in Detroit's East Side, where diverse groups gathered, some skeptical, others hopeful. Voices echoed the same concerns: job security, affordable energy, privacy, and cultural identity. Listening carefully, Sarah sensed that bridging these divides demanded empathy and collaboration rather than confrontation. Back at TerraVolt headquarters, she convened a new council, an inclusive coalition of activists, industry leaders, policymakers, and community representatives. Among them was Jack Reynolds, a former coal miner turned clean energy advocate, whose transformation symbolized the possibility of change. There was also Angela Kim, a privacy rights lawyer skeptical of TeraVolt's data practices, and Luis Martinez, a tech entrepreneur focused on equitable access. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance, each bringing unique perspectives and expertise. The Council's first challenge was to craft a comprehensive framework addressing economic transition, data privacy, and community empowerment. The process was intense, marked by passionate debates and moments of breakthrough. Sarah's leadership was tested as she navigated competing priorities and fostered mutual respect. Slowly, a shared vision emerged, one that balanced innovation with social responsibility, technology with humanity. Meanwhile, TeraVolt's technical teams continued refining the smart grid, incorporating feedback from the council and community pilots. Transparency became a cornerstone, with open data platforms and regular public updates fostering trust. The coalition's efforts culminated in a landmark public event, a Future of Energy summit held in Detroit, drawing national attention. The summit showcased TeraVolt's technology alongside stories of real people whose lives had been transformed. Panels explored issues of justice, privacy, and economic opportunity, while workshops engaged citizens in shaping the energy future. The event was a resounding success, shifting narratives and inspiring collaboration across divides. But the path was far from smooth. Opponents mounted legal challenges, and misinformation campaigns persisted. Sarah faced personal attacks questioning her motives and competence. Yet, bolstered by the coalition's support and her team's dedication, she persevered. The experience deepened her understanding of leadership as an act of service and resilience. Amid the turmoil, Sarah's personal life blossomed in small but meaningful ways. Moments with Mark grew more intentional, conversations with Maya more hopeful, and connections with her community more profound. These relationships became lifelines, reminding her of the human stories at the heart of the struggle. As winter deepened, TeraVolt prepared to launch its most ambitious project yet, a regional energy cooperative owned and operated by local communities, embodying the principles forged through unexpected alliances. The cooperative promised to redefine power, not just electricity, but the power to shape one's future. Standing on the snowy rooftop of TeraVolt's hub, Sarah gazed at the city lights shimmering below. The journey had been arduous, filled with conflict and compromise, but the emerging unity was a beacon of hope. America's energy future was no longer a distant dream, it was being built, together. The fragile optimism that had begun to blossom around TeraVolt's groundbreaking energy cooperative was abruptly cast into shadow as winter deepened. What started as isolated murmurs of skepticism soon erupted into a full-scale crisis, threatening to unravel not only the project but Sarah Bennett's leadership and the very idea of clean energy transformation. A coordinated disinformation campaign emerged, fueled by powerful interests seeking to undermine TeraVolt's credibility. False reports circulated claiming that the smart grid was vulnerable to cyber attacks, exposing personal data and risking blackouts. The narrative tapped into widespread fears about technology and privacy, igniting protests in several pilot cities. Media outlets amplified the controversy, often without verifying facts, creating a maelstrom of doubt and fear. Internally, TeraVolt faced its darkest hour. Employees felt demoralized as social media backlash surged, investors hesitated, and political allies wavered. Sarah was thrust into the eye of the storm, receiving urgent calls, hostile emails, and public scrutiny that felt relentless. The pressure weighed heavily on her, stirring moments of self-doubt and exhaustion. Yet, amid the chaos, Sarah refused to surrender. Drawing on the strength forged through years of struggle, she rallied her team and allies with unwavering resolve. TeraVolt's communication strategy pivoted, emphasizing transparency, education, and direct community engagement. Public forums were organized where citizens could voice concerns and hear directly from engineers and privacy experts. TeraVolt also invited independent cybersecurity firms to conduct thorough audits and share their findings publicly, dispelling fears through evidence. The campaign to reclaim the narrative was arduous but vital. Sarah understood that winning back trust required more than facts, it demanded empathy and connection. She began visiting affected communities personally, listening to stories of fear and frustration, and sharing her own journey of challenges and hopes. These encounters humanized the crisis and began to soften public opinion. Behind the scenes, TerraVault's technical teams worked feverishly to enhance security measures, implement real-time monitoring, and develop rapid response protocols for potential threats. Their dedication exemplified the company's commitment to protecting users and the integrity of the system. Political battles intensified as well. Some legislators doubled down on opposition, proposing restrictive regulations that could cripple TerraVault's expansion. Others, swayed by the mounting evidence and public support, stepped forward with renewed advocacy for clean energy. Sarah engaged in high-stakes negotiations, navigating a polarized landscape with diplomacy and tenacity. The ordeal tested her leadership like never before, revealing both vulnerabilities and strengths. On a personal level, the crisis took a toll. Long hours and stress strained Sarah's relationships, especially with Mark, who worried about her health and well-being. Yet, these challenges also deepened their bond, as they found solace and strength in one another. Maya's support remained a beacon of hope, reminding Sarah that the fight was bigger than any one person. As the storm slowly abated, TerraVault emerged with lessons learned and a stronger foundation. The crisis underscored the fragile nature of progress and the importance of resilience, transparency, and community trust. Sarah's reflections crystallized into a renewed vision, one that embraced complexity and uncertainty while steadfastly pursuing innovation and justice. Standing on the TerraVault rooftop on a clear winter night, Sarah looked out over the city glittering with lights powered by their technology. The path had been harrowing, the battles fierce, but the promise endured. America's future was still being forged, fraught with shadows, yet illuminated by determination and hope. As winter gave way to early spring, the atmosphere around TerraVault shifted from tension to cautious optimism. The devastating crisis of misinformation and public distrust had left deep scars, but it also ignited a transformation within the company and the broader clean energy movement. Sarah Bennett, weary but unwavering, sensed the turning tide. Months of relentless dedication, transparent communication, and grassroots engagement had begun to restore confidence in TerraVault's vision. The nationwide energy cooperative was now gaining traction, with communities embracing ownership and control over their power sources. A pivotal moment arrived when a landmark federal bill supporting clean energy infrastructure passed Congress, signaling political validation of TerraVault's mission. The legislation included provisions for funding rural electrification, data privacy protections, and incentives for community-led projects, elements championed by TerraVault's coalition. The victory was bittersweet, achieved only through relentless lobbying, strategic alliances, and the tireless work of countless advocates. But it marked a crucial step forward. With this support, TerraVault accelerated expansion plans, focusing on integrating renewable energy sources and smart grid technology across diverse regions. Pilot programs in Midwestern towns demonstrated impressive results, reduced energy costs, job creation, and increased grid resilience. Sarah watched with pride as communities once dependent on aging, polluting infrastructure embraced a new era of sustainable power. Yet, the journey was far from over. Scaling operations brought new challenges, technical complexities, supply chain constraints, and the ongoing need to balance innovation with accessibility. Sarah and her leadership team adopted an adaptive approach, fostering a culture of learning and collaboration. They invested heavily in workforce development, partnering with educational institutions to train the next generation of engineers and technicians from underrepresented communities. These efforts aligned with TerraVault's core values of equity and inclusion, ensuring that progress benefited all Americans. On the personal front, Sarah's relationships flourished. The hardships of the past year deepened her bond with Mark, who remained a steadfast source of support. Maya blossomed as a passionate advocate and leader in her own right, embodying the hope and energy of youth. Together, they celebrated small victories and found joy in moments of quiet reflection. A particularly moving event was the unveiling of a new TerraVault community center in a Detroit neighborhood long plagued by economic hardship. The center provided education, job training, and a hub for local innovation, symbolizing TerraVault's commitment to holistic transformation. Sarah's speech at the opening ceremony was heartfelt, drawing from her own experiences and the collective journey. She spoke of resilience, unity, and the power of dreams made real through collaboration. The media coverage that followed painted TerraVault not just as a tech company, but as a catalyst for social change. As spring blossomed in earnest, Sarah stood once more on the rooftop of TerraVault's headquarters, gazing out over the city alive with light and possibility. The battles had been fierce, the sacrifices great, but the vision endured. America was beginning to embrace a future shaped by clean energy, innovation, and community. Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope, knowing that this was only the beginning. The turning tide had arrived, and with it, the promise of a new dawn. The first light of dawn spilled softly over Detroit's skyline, painting the city in hues of gold and amber. Sarah Bennett stood quietly on the rooftop of TerraVault's headquarters, breathing in the crisp morning air. Below, the city stirred awake, powered by the very innovation she had helped build. It was a moment of triumph, but also profound reflection. The journey had been long, fraught with challenges that tested every fiber of her being. Crises that threatened to undo everything, victories hard won, and lessons learned in the crucible of leadership. As she looked out, Sarah's thoughts drifted back to where it all began, a small Ohio town shadowed by factory closures, a young girl fueled by hope and determination to change the world. That past was woven into every choice, every risk taken. Now, standing at the cusp of a new era, she saw how far she and America had come. TerraVault was no longer just a company. It had become a movement, a beacon of possibility for communities long marginalized and overlooked. The energy cooperative model had spread across states, empowering citizens to reclaim control over their power and futures. Innovations pioneered by TerraVault had sparked ripple effects worldwide, inspiring new solutions to climate change and economic inequality. Yet, the true measure of success was not technology alone, it was the human stories. Families finding stability, workers gaining new skills and purpose, neighborhoods transformed by clean, reliable energy. Sarah knew that progress was never linear, and the path ahead would hold new trials. But she felt ready, grounded by the relationships that sustained her, Mark's unwavering support, Maya's passionate leadership, and the bonds forged with countless others who shared the dream. In those moments of quiet dawn, Sarah reflected on the greatest lessons the journey had taught her. The power of resilience in the face of adversity, the necessity of empathy in leadership, and the importance of inclusivity and transparency in building trust. She thought of the unexpected alliances that had turned foes into partners, the sacrifices made for a vision larger than oneself. And she embraced the truth that progress required humility, the willingness to listen, to adapt, and to learn. As the city awakened fully, Sarah descended to the main floor, greeted by her team, diverse, vibrant, united. Together, they celebrated milestones but remained focused on the future. Plans were underway to expand TerraVault's impact globally, to innovate further, and to nurture the next generation of leaders and changemakers. Before leaving for the day, Sarah paused by the community center TerraVault had helped establish years earlier. Children played outside, their laughter a soundtrack to hope and renewal. She smiled, knowing that every step, every challenge, every heartbreak, had led to this living legacy. Turning to her team, she shared a simple but profound message: life is full of surprises, but love and perseverance will always lead the way. The words resonated deeply, an affirmation of the journey and a beacon for what was yet to come. Sarah Bennett's story was a testament to the power of vision, courage, and heart. America's future was being shaped by those willing to dream boldly and act bravely. And as the new dawn broke, she knew that the best chapters were still unwritten. 1 year later, the streets of Chicago buzzed with a kind of energy Sarah Bennett hadn't felt in a long time, not just electricity pulsing through smart grids or autonomous vehicles humming quietly down redesigned streets, but human energy, possibility, the quiet hum of a society waking up to its potential. The TerraVolt cooperative model had become a national template for cities seeking energy justice and technological renewal, and Chicago, once plagued by outdated infrastructure and widening economic gaps, had become the latest city to launch a full transition under TerraVolt's guidance. Sarah walked along Lake Shore Drive early that morning, her coat wrapped tight against the spring wind, as the horizon bled orange and pink into the still blue dawn. This city felt different from Detroit, different from the factories and childhood streets of Ohio. Here the pace was relentless, the scale intimidating, but she felt at peace. This wasn't about launching a new program or battling misinformation anymore. This was about legacy, about sustaining a movement without burning it to the ground. The past year had been a strange mixture of healing and transition. After the federal energy legislation passed and TerraVolt became a household name, Sarah took a rare step back from day-to-day operations. The board had respected her decision, understanding she wasn't quitting, just passing the baton. Carlos had stepped in as interim CEO and, eventually, full-time. His technical precision balanced by Maya's new role as the youngest ever Director of Policy and Equity at TerraVolt created a leadership team rooted in both experience and revolution. Sarah had shifted into a different role, ambassador, mentor, visionary, speaking at global forums, advising emerging startups, and guiding international partners as countries from South America to Southeast Asia sought to emulate what TerraVolt had done in the U.S. She had no office now, no daily schedule, and yet she'd never been busier, traveling from city to city with one unifying message: the clean energy future had to be local, inclusive, and just, or it would never last. But here, walking alone in Chicago as the sun crept higher, she felt a rare stillness. She thought about Mark, who'd taken a sabbatical from his architectural firm and was now designing community innovation hubs in underserved neighborhoods, spaces inspired by the one they'd first built together in Detroit. They'd just moved into a small apartment overlooking Grant Park. It wasn't flashy, but it was theirs. For the first time, they were building something personal instead of just professional. And Sarah thought about Maya, who had grown from a fiery activist into a formidable force on Capitol Hill. She now advised the Senate Clean Tech Committee, representing the very generation that had once felt abandoned by politicians and billionaires alike. Every time Sarah saw her speak on a panel or write a powerful op-ed in a national paper, she felt a pang of pride so deep it hurt. She'd once mentored Maya, but now Maya was shaping policy in ways Sarah had only dreamed of. And then there was the nation itself, still divided in many ways, still wrestling with old prejudices and fears, but undeniably changed. In towns where coal had been king, solar farms and battery factories were now the largest employers. In neighborhoods that had gone decades without investment, energy cooperatives were putting power, literal and political, back in the hands of residents. Schools were teaching climate science alongside computer coding. Grandparents who once feared technology now used apps to monitor their rooftop panels and trade energy credits with their neighbors. And kids were dreaming again. Not just of being astronauts or athletes, but engineers, community leaders, solar technicians, and environmental lawyers. That was the real revolution. It hadn't happened all at once. There were still blackouts, still bureaucratic delays, still political infighting and media wars. But the narrative had shifted. America, slowly, painfully, had begun to believe in building again. Not just faster or cheaper, but smarter, fairer, together. Sarah's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A message from Carlos. The Tokyo delegation had confirmed their interest in a joint TerraVolt Asia initiative. Another from Maya. Her interview on CNN had been picked up by international outlets and was trending in climate policy circles. And one from her mother, a photo of the family home back in Ohio with its brand new solar roof and a handwritten message: "Look what the neighbors are asking about. You did that." She smiled. It still didn't feel real sometimes. The girl who once watched her town crumble was now helping cities rise. As she walked past a row of cafes just opening for breakfast, a man called her name. "Ms. Bennett?" He was middle-aged, maybe late 50s, with a kind face and work-worn hands. My wife and I just moved here from Gary, he said. I was in steel for 30 years. Now I'm helping wire solar systems on the south side. We used your training program. He hesitated. We've never met, but I just wanted to say, thank you. Sarah shook his hand, emotion catching in her throat. No, she said softly, thank you. It wasn't about fame or legacy or innovation anymore. It was about stories like his. People rewriting their futures, one panel, one job, one decision at a time. That's what TerraVolt had always been about. Not Elon Musk's legacy. Not corporate dominance. Not headlines. But people. Real people reclaiming power, in every sense of the word. The sun had fully risen now, glinting off rooftops and solar arrays, dancing in the mirrored windows of high-rises. Sarah turned back toward the park, toward the apartment, toward whatever was next. She knew there would be new challenges. Climate change was far from solved. The world would still argue, still stall, still struggle to adapt. But something had shifted. Not just in politics or tech, but in people. They had begun to believe. That was the spark. That was the innovation. That was the change that could truly last. And as long as they kept pushing, kept building, kept believing, then maybe, just maybe, America's best chapter hadn't been written yet. It was still unfolding. One morning. One story. One city at a time. The summer sun settled gently over Austin, Texas, casting long golden streaks across the hills as the city pulsed with a new kind of energy, not just the electrons flowing through TerraVolt's most advanced cooperative grid yet, but the kind of energy born from momentum, from progress that had broken through fear, from belief that had once seemed impossible. Sarah Bennett stepped off the stage at the International Climate and Innovation Forum to a standing ovation, not because she had delivered anything new, she hadn't unveiled a product or pitched a breakthrough technology, but because she had told the truth. She had stood before a crowd of leaders, students, policymakers, and skeptics, and spoken plainly about failure, about the nights she thought she had ruined everything, the years where compromise felt like betrayal, the mornings she woke up unsure if anything they were doing would matter in time. And then she spoke of now. Of the cities that had risen from disinvestment into beacons of resilience. Of neighborhoods once cut off from opportunity that now generated their own clean power and revenue. Of former critics who had become allies, and young activists who had become leaders. She didn't sugarcoat the future, climate risks were still accelerating, inequality still haunted progress, and the political landscape remained volatile. But she reminded them that every revolution worth building would be built not in one leap, but in millions of hard, personal, often invisible decisions. And when she left the stage, she felt the energy shift, the spark catch, the crowd come alive. Outside the venue, she was greeted by a dozen young students wearing T-shirts that read, "We are the grid," part of a youth-led initiative teaching solar installation, data transparency, and digital civics in public high schools across the South. They asked for a picture, then a moment of her time. One girl, no older than 15, told her that her father had worked 2 decades at a shuttered refinery and now worked with TerraVolt, training kids like her. "He says your story gave him hope," she said. "And now he tells me I can do anything. So I want to be an engineer. Or maybe start a cooperative myself. In our town. Where nobody believed in us." Sarah knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "You already are an engineer," she said gently. "Building something new every time you believe in what's possible." It hit her again, like it always did in moments like this. The real innovation wasn't a battery or a grid algorithm or a political framework. It was belief. Belief that change could come from the margins. Belief that leadership didn't have to look like billionaires or tech moguls. Belief that power didn't just flow through wires, it flowed through people. Through community. Through connection. Later that night, as Sarah walked along the Colorado River beneath a sky scattered with stars, she called Mark, who was back in Chicago finalizing plans for a new neighborhood design project that blended public art, energy self-sufficiency, and local food systems. Their voices were quiet, soft, familiar. He told her he missed her. She told him she'd be home in 2 days. They didn't need to say much. Their love was quiet and constant, built on years of fire and ice, of missed flights and long nights, of coffee-fueled work marathons and handheld rooftop silences. It was real, and strong, and now more than ever, it felt earned. When she returned to Chicago, the city greeted her with its usual pace, buzzing, vibrant, relentless. TerraVolt's headquarters had moved into a newly transformed industrial complex on the south side, once an abandoned warehouse district, now the living heart of what some were calling the Civic Power District. A bold experiment in democratic energy, local wealth, and urban redesign. There, Sarah met with Carlos and Maya, who were preparing to announce TerraVolt's partnership with a coalition of African and Latin American cities to bring community-powered grids to places that had long been exploited or ignored by foreign investment. It wasn't just expansion, it was restitution. Rebuilding trust through local ownership and global solidarity. Maya, now in her late 20s, had grown into a formidable force, equal parts strategist and poet, tough and visionary. She wore her curly hair wild, her sneakers worn down from travel, and she no longer hesitated to challenge anyone, especially Sarah. But Sarah welcomed it. She had always wanted to build something that would outgrow her, and now she had. After the meeting, the three of them sat on the edge of the rooftop garden, watching the solar canopies adjust their angles with the setting sun. Carlos, always the steady compass, spoke first. "You ever think we'd get here?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I dreamed it. But this is better than the dream." Maya laughed, pushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "Good. Because now we're aiming higher." That night, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. The world was still far from safe. Sea levels were rising. Entire ecosystems were vanishing. Political tensions were flaring across the globe. But still, there was something in the air. A shift. A readiness. She thought back to Elon Musk, how it had all started, oddly enough, with a bold move by a man people either worshipped or criticized, how his vision had lit a fire under industry and inspired countless others to imagine something different. And yet, it was people like Maya, like the girl in Austin, like the former coal miners in Kentucky and the immigrant mothers in Detroit, those were the people who had made the movement real. That was the real innovation. Sarah opened her notebook and began to write, not a business plan or a speech, but a letter to her younger self. She wrote about fear, and falling, and rising again. She wrote about love, and leadership, and how the world doesn't change all at once, it changes when people, ordinary people, dare to act as if it already has. And then, when the first rays of sun began to stretch across the city, she closed the notebook and smiled. Because tomorrow was coming. And the spark, her spark, their spark, was still burning. In every streetlight powered by the sun. In every child learning how to store energy in a recycled battery. In every hand extended across divisions. In every story retold, each time with more clarity, more strength, more purpose. The future wasn't a product. It wasn't a grid. It wasn't a company. It was a generation, and it had already begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?